This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Mint Mobile. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie. It is Thursday, March 13th, and I'm here in Stuttgart today with James Liu of Mercedes, and we're going to talk about the new CLA. This is the day the car is revealed, so I've got a lot of exciting questions. I'm super happy and excited about what I've seen. So, James, welcome.
Thank you very much, Miriam. Really appreciate being here.
I'm really excited you're on the show. As you know, I'm a big fan of EVs, and it's been kind of hard to see the evolution of EVs kind of stumbling a bit in the last few years, especially traditional car makers have had a hard time with software. You have made a great effort with MB.OS. Mm-hmm. You created an entire building and team to develop this.
Yep.
And what I've seen so far with the E-Class and the previous EQ products like EQS, EQE has been very, very exciting. And so the CLA, you're kind of taking things a whole new dimension, and a whole new direction. And that's what I want to talk with you about really briefly.
Absolutely.
So give us some context, right? Like for me, my audience is looking right now at, Tesla, for better or worse. There's a lot of problems with this Tesla right now. I'm an ex-Tesla owner.
Yeah.
I still love their products, but I'm reluctant to buy them for good reason. However, my audience still sees Tesla and the Chinese EVs and Lucid and Rivian kind of as leading the pack in terms of the user experience, the software experience. And so I know that with the investment you've made, obviously you're aware of that and you're kind of pushing in that direction. When you define what CLA, the platform, would be, kind of how did you, what were your targets and goals? Because software-defined vehicles, everybody's using that word. But the reality is there's very few cars out there that can be OTA'd fully, right?
Absolutely.
And because the CLA is also a platform that is a combustion platform as well, so it's a shared platform, I'm curious kind of like how you were able to step in and create a foundation for the software experience, the user experience, the hardware that supports the software to be able to do the things you wanted to do, which presumably were to kind of match some of that we're seeing with Tesla, Rivian,
Absolutely.
Lucid. So how did you get started? Like, how were you able to set those boundaries with the team?
Oh, man. Okay. I think that's a big question because you really nailed it. I think, software-defined vehicle itself is it's a bit of a loose term. Let's call it that, right? I think it's almost a marketing.
Everybody has a different idea.
Of what it is. But you really, the way I like to think about it is actually less about software. It's actually more about how does a company steer like a software company.
Right.
That's actually the most important aspect. So I'll get to your technology question, but I think the context of this is actually quite important, right? When you look at the tech startups, the EV startups, our Chinese competitors, these vehicles start from zero, to go to one, and they have their platforms basically designed from the ground up. And, the challenge we have as really these kind of traditional OEMs is we have a supply chain, we have all of our ECU components, we have multi-year deals and legacy.
Suppliers to deal with.
So really, the software design aspect of that is really the journey that we have been on, really since, I would say, 2018, all the way to now where we have finally, let's say, accomplished the capability of being able to flash every piece of software in the car.
Right. So that's the goal you've reached with CLA platform.
Correct.
So that's exciting.
That gives
you a big blank canvas, right?
Absolutely.
Then in terms of, I don't know how specific you can get about the hardware because I know partnerships are difficult, especially in the automotive space.
Yep.
On smartphones, everybody tells us what CPUs they're using and stuff.
Sure.
But give us an idea of how much space you have going forward in terms of hardware to implement some of the features that these cars are going to be on the road for, a decade or something, right?
Absolutely.
So you need a bit of headroom is what I was looking for.
Absolutely.
What choices were you able to make there, and were you able to make these choices? Because the CLA is going to be an affordable car too, right? So there's obviously the constraint of cost here.
Yeah, good question. We have the latest Qualcomm chip actually inside the vehicle.
Okay, great.
But again, I think this is where, going back to software-defined vehicles, we're going to go out the door to CLA now. We're going to use every headroom we have, obviously, to basically power the experience.
Right.
But of course, our ability to then update the software, improve our overall performance, that's part of the journey, I think, of the software-defined vehicle.
Right.
Because it's not just about, hey, one time we hit SOP and we're done. No. It's about, okay, we got this out the door. Okay, we, like all companies, of course, we have to make trade-offs to say, hey, performance versus feature. But now what we're the most excited about and the teams that we've built here is now we can iterate. Historically, if you look at traditional companies, even with, going back to just even the E-Class, which we launched a couple of years ago, we didn't have full control of that stack.
And I know that. That's kind of why I was asking you, because, I know that there's what you want to do, and then there's the constraints of reality of manufacturing, supply chain, cost, working with suppliers, right? And so obviously if you start from scratch completely as a company like some of these Chinese manufacturers have, or, the 3 startups in the US, it's a lot easier, right? But now even Tesla now is starting to have a legacy, right? In terms of their architecture and their platform, right?
Yeah, and you have to have different hardware updates. Okay, I have to, the promise that we made in the past, can we fulfill it in the future?
So the new MBOS is obviously now the full enchilada of MBOS, right? Because I know that in E-Class, you're only kind of doing part of it, because now you are doing everything. You got like the ADAS is, all of it, the motor control, everything software defined. Now, of course, the end user doesn't see any of that, but they feel it. They feel the way the motors are tuned. They feel the way the battery, the BMS operates when they charge, and they see the charging performance, right? And so what I'm more interested in finding out is with MBOS, like the actual in-car experience, the infotainment, the ADAS, et cetera. Like, what were you able to do with CLA that you couldn't do with EQ before? And kind of like, I've seen some of the things you showed at the various tech summits you've had, but I'm kind of curious, like, what can Mercedes customers that get this vehicle when it comes out expect and look forward to? That's new.
It's a big question. But again, I think we have quite a lot of examples. Let me hit the first point about what's different about our software-defined vehicle journey, right? So going back to the E-Class, the E-Class, we really had, frankly, one computer, one ECU, the infotainment system, which we developed end-to-end.
Right.
We didn't yet really have full control over body controller or the ADAS stack. A concrete example here for the CLA, one of our big features is surround navigation. Right. Surround navigation. And just in the process of developing that, as any software engineer will know, you find out that you have throughput issues.
Right.
I'm not getting enough signal actually coming out. I can't actually process all the objects that we need to see in the vehicle. In the old days, that's a phone call to a supplier.
Right.
When can you deliver something? Oh, let's wait. And maybe we flash something in a fresh up, 3 years from now.
Right. And then to bring your car to the dealer.
Bring the car to the
that
dealer.
Component wasn't designed to be OTA, etc. And it's a mess.
Yeah. And even in that little tiny example, right, where we, of course, ran into those issues. How do we get more throughput? Instead of a phone call to a supplier, we turn around to the guy next to us and say, hey, let's get our interfaces updated. Let's figure out how to get more throughput in the system. And then now we can show more objects and really create that more sense of safety for the customer. And you can see very easily, you drive in an E-Class, and it's a wonderful car. Please go buy an E-Class. I'm not saying it's not a wonderful car, but you drive around and like a lot of these, let's say, more traditional first ADAS systems, you see a couple of objects around you.
Yeah,
right? And you see a car, these level 1 systems you see the car that you're following, basically. You're in the CLA, you go to, you're stuck in a traffic situation, and you see every vehicle out there. And even something as simple as that, like those are the features that we can unlock in our software development process. Another good example, I think, is our speech system, right? And that's definitely not Mercedes Me, but the Mercedes virtual assistant.
Oh, the assistant, yeah.
And again, to enable a speech system, we have to, as a manufacturer, as a vehicle manufacturer, we have to worry about both the connected and the disconnected use cases. So when you're not connected, you're driving in a tunnel, you're in New Mexico somewhere, speech still has to work.
Yeah.
So we need embedded systems as well as cloud systems. Right. And what's really new with the CLA is we built a cloud and embedded multi-agent system, which allows us to really plug in some of the best LLMs that are, I will call them suppliers, but they really are tech companies can offer.
Yeah.
So working with Google for navigation, because of course they provide the data for the APIs for Places API, and we can leverage their LLM to help us basically create a conversational experience. And we can leverage Microsoft OpenAI to use their models to answer general questions of knowledge. And it's because we have that architecture, we can define it in the full vehicle, we can bring that experience to the customer.
You make a good point about the offline aspects of it. And I think that the new LLMs, some of them obviously, especially with Qualcomm, can run on device very easily without connectivity. You slightly downgrade it, but generally not noticeably bad.
Absolutely.
I mean, unless you need some real-time data.
Yeah.
But my question is, there's kind of two approaches philosophically around the in-car user experience, the software experience, right? And I'm talking like the whole thing, but mostly infotainment. And that's projection versus native, right? I'm a big proponent of native. I don't like projection. You don't project your iPhone to your laptop or your iPad to your
log into
laptop. You log into your Apple account and you get all your data. So now you can't obviously do that because Apple is going to control that. But Google, for example, lets you do that. We've seen some Android automotive-based systems that basically embrace all of the Google stuff. Now you're using Google's map data and POI data. That's a different thing. But that's kind of what intrigued me about MBOS when it was announced 2 years ago, is that you're trying to create your own complete ecosystem, but integrate with all the external services, whether it be Tidal or, whatever for the Dolby Atmos stuff, because right now it's the only thing. Well, I guess there's Apple Music as well that's possibly coming or something. But the point I'm making is that, based on my kind of perspective of projection is kind of a short-term solution, and long-term, we should be going to native systems, and each manufacturer can provide something really solid.
Right.
How are you doing that right now, and what can you integrate? Because, obviously, like I noticed that you don't have Google integration to the extent where it knows my Google Calendar yet. You're missing a few things like that, right? For example, you don't have my search history in Google Maps.
Correct.
Because you're not using that, right? Obviously, the car can create its own history, and it also learns, and it adapts to you over time, and that's all great. But I think most users are going to look at it as like, I want to be able to log in with as many services as I can and kind of have the infotainment system kind of connect all that data into one big sauce, right? And of course, you only get that sauce in the car, right? Because when you're using your Android phone or whatever, you only get the Google sauce, right? So how do you make it so that that sauce still tastes good? Well, it's such a mix of things. And also, more importantly, how are you going to integrate some of these features? Because here's the thing, right? The baseline has been set by, again, Tesla and the Chinese manufacturers like Xiaomi, for example, with their ecosystem, and Huawei with their ecosystem, where you basically some table stakes have been set. Like the phone in your pocket is your key. The phone has access to your information, passes on to the car. That's one approach, which actually works pretty well. Because, Tesla doesn't let you log in with Google, yet they see your calendar and they see your text and they see, your search history, because you can send your Google Maps searches to the Tesla app, and then it goes to the car. So I'm kind of wondering, like, where you guys see yourselves. You do that too. And I think that's the other thing, right? Like, the critical thing is that you want ultimately to be able to integrate all this stuff, but right now you need to deliver to the customer what they see on other platforms, right? So how do you kind of balance that? Because it's a lot of work on either side. Right?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot to unpack there. I think the key thing is we offer customers choice. You use projection mode, CarPlay, Android Auto, fantastic.
Great, it's there.
Great, it's there. You can use it. Good experience.
You're renting a car. You're renting a car. Solution.
It's fantastic. Yeah. And even for us, especially let's call it our legacy cars as well. Fantastic solution. Had it for years, and we generally find that customers mostly use it for media apps.
Okay.
Spotify, and of course, I think that what you're talking about is that lack of friction.
Exactly.
And that lack of friction where your personal device kind of travels everywhere, it's of course it's real and it's good for the customer. So I personally, and in the Gara company, there's a reason why we still have that choice for the customer. We don't believe in taking away that choice. Now, I think as you're saying, when it comes to integrating the ecosystem, that creates more work for us, for the customer. And it's really a balance of, is it worth it? What's the trade-off? What are we trying to do for the customer? And I do think, for me personally, and how I like to think about it, I don't really think of the car really as a personal device. It's really a communal device.
Correct.
It's actually more like a television, if you will.
Yeah.
Right. And it's when you have multiple people sitting in the car, it's a shared device. We talk to each other. A lot of people call this like ambient computing. That
Yeah.
paradigm of ambient computing, I think, is actually the right one for us.
I agree. I love it.
Yeah, and again, you have that with the multiple microphones in the car. We have the immersive experience with sound, 4D sound. Like that's the experience we're trying to create. So, to me, I think this idea of we need to capture every customer's endpoint so that we can capture their data and then sell them ads and things like that, that's not who we are, right? And that's really the reason why we didn't take, and I love Google, we work with them very well, but we made a very specific choice not to just integrate a standard Google navigation.
Right.
Because, hey, we want to ensure, and our customers expect, that we take care of their privacy, that all of the data never gets shared with third-party partners. And we take that very serious as a company. And that's what makes us a Mercedes-Benz.
Right.
So I think that it's going to be a balance, of course. And the ecosystem's time keeps changing. Android Automotive, from like what the ecosystem was and the business conditions around that ecosystem 5 years ago is completely different today. So I think, again, to me, there's no right answer. It's actually really about how do we be more dynamic. Right. And how do we make the right choices year over year? And that, I think, is what I'm excited about, because you look at the Xiaomi and things like that. It's, you see that a company like Xiaomi, which is a great vehicle, kind of already point to, okay, can we have a full ecosystem? But even there, I think you still see some seams, right? Like you launch an application and you have, their version of video on the side. It's like, sure. Oh, wow, okay. But again, I think that's the exciting thing about the industry right now is we get to learn all of this together, right? And us as a traditional OEM now having the capability as a software-defined vehicle, I'm really looking forward, and I hope the customers will look forward to all the cool stuff we're going to bring out.
I'm excited about it. What I've seen so far is really cool. I think what I'd love to know and see in action is very quick iteration and quick updates when customers, they want camp mode. Let's make that happen very quickly.
Yes.
Now that you have that platform, because I think that's the big challenge is like they're seeing their experiences, again, I know a lot of people are leaving Tesla. I did. But then we go to another car and I'm like, oh, I can't do this.
Can't get my
I can't do that.
Right.
And so, why can't I, right? Like, it doesn't matter how the details of it matters to you and me how the details of the implementation, but the average driver doesn't or passenger doesn't care, right?
Yes.
And that's why, for example, like one day I'd love to be able to say to my Mercedes assistant, when's the next Lakers game added to my calendar?
Yeah.
Just like I do with my phone. Google just introduced that, actually. It's that feature. So I'm like, do you think that one of the workarounds, since projection is kind of a shorter term thing and it's kind of hard to create your own ecosystem because you have to integrate with so many different logins from so many different services right now. Do you think that an alternative would be for your voice assistant to, via Bluetooth, ask my voice assistant on my phone for the results it needs and then reintegrate them into the car or something?
Oh, it's really funny.
Because as we're going more towards a voice interaction model, I'm wondering if that's kind of the way to go.
No, you're talking about basically agent to agent.
Yeah, agent to agent,
right?
exactly.
I mean, it's
you can do it now. That's the best part.
I think there's a couple interesting things there, right? Like you are in the older days. Let's say, okay, well, what the agent ecosystem I think is really pointing to is that language is the new API.
Yeah.
Right. So we no longer have to, we have to do a Google integration. Now we have to build an app and we have to get our APIs connected. Now the universal API is language. Right.
Yeah.
And that's, you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot of excitement, a lot of, and us too, very excited really exploring that space. So, we solved an agent to agent communication in our car already. Right? We have a Google agent, we have a Microsoft agent, and our car has context, has a wide context when it remembers what you're saying to both agents.
Right.
And I think that's actually one of our strengths now. Okay. Again, going back to the whole ambient computing platform, is we're not locking our customers into an ecosystem. And I fully believe, like what you're saying, that the app paradigm is now shifting more and more to that agentic paradigm.
For sure.
And the new business models will come. We still need to authenticate. We have to figure all those things out. But ultimately, I think it'll be fine. And so again, I think in some ways, I think that these communal devices, as opposed to these personal devices where you stick your head in a gobble. Apologize. I
feel very much the same as you.
It's really where I think we will go. Which again, what makes a Mercedes and our work so exciting for our team is that we really get to play with that space.
Do you foresee a point? I think this is a very positive, message that we can end with. And I think, could you see a point where every person that interacts with a Mercedes vehicle kind of has its own bubble of data in the Mercedes ecosystem that can be detected by some kind of authentication and then reappear, obviously, in another vehicle or another context?
Yeah.
Because I think that's what's going to be critical. The kind of knowledge graph of the agents is going to travel with you, right?
Yeah,
because
yeah.
Your phone's pretty simple. Everything's on your phone, right? Your laptop
Not
has
always.
a little bit of it was on your phone,
Right.
maybe. But like as we're moving forward with this more agentic kind of setup, I think I see a point where you're a Mercedes driver, but maybe you're renting another Mercedes somewhere else. But two other Mercedes drivers are with you. So now there's like a magic little sauce, as we were talking earlier, of the three of your agents.
Right.
Graphs kind of talking to each other and
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't think anyone's quite solved that yet. I think if anybody solved that, I would love to invest in their company. But you really have to separate out when you're talking about things like user data. You really have to separate out. When you think about personalization, right? Like personal data from context.
Yeah.
Right. And of course, from a personal data perspective, like we have every country has a different set of laws. Basically, you're in Europe, like as we are today, GDPR puts some very strong regulations, and rightfully for data.
No, it's very important.
Very important.
Yeah.
And, also in China, same thing. We're even seeing stricter consumer protection there. So I think being able to split and separate what is considered context versus personal data is actually going to be a very interesting, let's call it unlock, between how do you do context carryover between the agents. Because what you don't want is, right, like I can imagine a dystopian world where you're walking around and every agent all of a sudden knows who I am.
Yeah.
Right? We don't want that.
No.
But we know that you can have really, I think, magical experiences, really intuitive experiences, if it's that context that moves with you. And I think that's the stuff we're interested in. We're thinking about. We're trying to solve some of those problems, and hopefully we see more and more of that development. And I think that's the next wave that we're going to have to deal with.
I'm excited because I kind of feel like the car industry is potentially the first one that can unlock that stuff because of that shared device thing, right?
You're trapped in the car with us.
Back in 20 years ago, the whole personal area network thing. Your watch and your smart ring and your phone would talk. But it was so beyond that now, right? And now having that shared experience, whether it's the television or the car, I think is...
It's like we used to... I don't want to live in a future where our goal is to get as many screens between you and me. Right. And, in our vehicle, and I think we're being very thoughtful with our car. Yes, it has screens, but we're using them in a way that fits the customer.
Right.
And we're trying to deliver a safe experience and really creating that immersive experience in a cocoon that you can't get anywhere else. So I'm totally with you.
Very comfortable.
Very comfortable cocoon. Very comfortable.
Well, listen, James, thanks so much for your time. This has been really insightful. I appreciate you chatting with me. Good stuff. I'm looking forward to driving the CLA at some point. So stay tuned, folks. Thanks, James.
Thank you very much.
And we're back, folks, with Jenny. Hi, Jenny. How are you?
Hi, I'm great. Thanks for having me. This is such an honor. I'm excited to chat, as always.
I'm super happy to have you on. We hung out at MWC, and I was like, Jenny's got to be on the show. And then I had a slot, and I was like, okay, let's make this happen. But today is Wednesday, March 12th, and we're going to talk about the news of the week. So, get situated, get comfortable, get your popcorn out, and we're going to rock and roll. Jenny, you were there with me, and I saw you did some reels that kind of stood out for me. Like you did a reel on the Realme crazy camera phone interchangeable lens thing. You also did a reel on the Realme 14 Pro Plus, which is the phone they launched there. I've had it for months now, and it's a really great phone. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And then, there's also the Lenovo crazy awesome concept laptops. There's always a bunch, but that trifold thing was incredible.
Right.
And then, let's talk about the Xiaomi car because, I cover cars as well on this podcast sometimes, and we just didn't even mention it, I think, more than once on the podcast last week on our recap. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on all that.
Yeah.
Where are you at with the Realme 14 Pro Plus? This is a real phone that people can buy.
Yeah, first, Realme reached out only recently. So this is my first phone. I am testing it out, and I mean, come on. First of all, the fact that you could dip your phone in a cold water is cool.
Yeah.
But the fact that it changes color, I mean, that's cute. I wish it was more like personal favorite pink, as you could see in the colors over here.
I mean, I have the Barbie phone right here. That's pink.
So I wish there was a little more, but it makes sense because like when you think of cold, you think of like a blue color. So I thought it was kind of intuitive to say, hey, this means it's colder. So I really like that. In terms of specs, I don't know if there's that many difference with phones out there. It's that special and per se, to be really honest with you, because honestly, Realme is just very good at, having so many great phones. So it's really more about like the outer specs and the exterior than just change
The
of
design,
UI and AI.
right?
Right,
Yeah.
because when they change AI, for example, or software, everything gets updated pretty equally, right? So
Yep.
I think it's really about the design outside. But yeah,
Yeah,
so
that makes sense.
I mean, I was testing, like, I don't know if you were there about Realme Party, like they were serving
I
us.
missed it.
Oh, you missed it. Darn. So
It was a
there
conflict for me. I had a Motorola dinner, I think.
That's fair. That's fair. Motorola's pretty cool. So
Yeah.
there. So what they did to show off that 14 Pro Plus was that they, with our drinks, they were serving 14 Pro Plus in the ice buckets. So
Yeah,
you
of
could
course.
see that it was there. And we're like, whoa, like that was like the first look from a lot of us. So that was fun. I thought it was clever of like just, instead of saying, hey, please take a photo of our phone, they were just putting it out there for you to have access to it. So
Yeah.
I thought that was a
absolutely.
nice touch for sure. In terms of that telephoto lens, like continuing with Realme and all, and the telephoto lens camera, at first, you're just like, oh, this is another gimmick. Like, it's not really working, right? But
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw, but Matt Swider, our
Yeah.
friend, he was there. He was like, let me test it for you. So he went pretty far.
Yeah.
And it was like end of like that whole table and all these displays are there, but with the like decent amount of focus, and it didn't take that long to focus, and I'm not even a pro camera person.
Yeah, right.
And it was like pretty good. I was like, this is impressive. And yeah, I was pretty impressed, but yeah.
Yeah. I think the thing about the 14 Pro Plus that people should know, and I've mentioned it on the podcast before, is that you're paying $350 to $400 for a mid-range phone, Snapdragon 7S Gen 3. That's the same chip that's in the Nothing Phone 3A, right? So
Yeah. Right.
And again, the Nothing Phone 3A Pro is kind of like up there with the Realme 14 Pro Plus. These are two phones that have 3x telephotos that don't suck, that are really solid, right? For that price point, for like, a third or half the price of a flagship. And that's, I think, what makes these so special, beyond the design, which obviously both of them have
Right.
their own kind of design chops, right? For me, what was fun about the 14 Pro Plus was that at the time I got it, I was in Canada, in Vancouver, and it was a couple of months back. So I think it was like December or something, or January. And it was very cold. I mean, not super cold because it's Vancouver, but it was colder than in San Francisco here. And so I was just around freezing. And as soon as I went outside, the whole back of it turned blue. And as soon as I went in the coffee shop, it went back to like this kind of normal color. And so I didn't have to dunk it in anything. It was really great.
That's cool. That's like cool to test. Unfortunately, I live in Arizona, so
yeah, good
it's
luck.
too warm here to
Ice
test
water
that.
or the fridge is probably the only other option. But yeah, it's cool. And then, for the concept, the one you talked about with Matt and the 10X, the thing is this 10X on a modern flagship, like especially a Chinese flagship, like a Xiaomi 15 Ultra, or like a, Oppo Find X8 Pro, or like a Vivo, 200 Pro. These are going to be matching the quality that you got at 10X. 10X is not hard to do on a phone. But the reality is, when you start pixel peeping, that photo you took of Matt with that big amount of glass is going to be still better than any computational photography trickery of a camera phone, right? Like a phone zoom. So that's what I think is really exciting about it. Is it practical? Like, you're probably going to end up, having to mount that thing on every time. I mean, it's a concept. That's why it's a concept. But what's interesting, and I mentioned this on the podcast last week, is this is not the first time we've seen this. This is Xiaomi did the same thing with the 12 Ultra 3 years ago, and
Right.
they had they put a 1-inch sensor in the middle and the back, and then an adapter, and you could mount lenses on it. And I think there's some value to that, but I also think that, what Xiaomi showed with the 15 that they modified
Right.
with the MagSafe, where the lens actually has the sensor in it. I think that has more legs because it just magnetically attaches. It's really fast. You can still use the phone normally. It still has all the other lenses on the phone. And then if you want to go nuts, you can pull one out of those in your bag or whatever you store it somewhere. And you have choices. One is a macro, one is an ultra wide.
Yeah.
And then you get that quality, the same kind of quality that we saw with the Realme, but without having to like mount it. Also, you get autofocus, which you don't have on that Realme prototype.
Right.
But I thought it was really cool. And I'm really glad you did a reel on it because your reel is so much better than mine. It really shows like how it actually comes together. Having Matt out there being your model and actually showing how much reach you could get was really, really cool.
Thanks.
What about the Lenovo stuff? What are your thoughts on that?
Let's be honest. Lenovo, they're so good at putting like as a content creator who tries to catch audience attention. I feel like Lenovo's content always does well because it's just like jaw dropping. Like that okay, yes, I did make the trifold laptop one recently, but I also did some at IFA and you were there. It's
I was
like
there.
incredible. Like they just like whether it's concept or not, right? It's like jaw dropping. That's like things that other companies, other brands do for phones. They execute it on a laptop, and you're just like, how is this even possible?
Yeah.
Right? Like this bigger scale, it's more complex. I'm just always blown away about Lenovo and their just expertise.
And at CES, they actually made a laptop that wasn't a concept, that actually the rollable
Which is
one
crazy.
is coming out.
Yeah.
It's not, it's real. And that kind of blew me away because I was like, okay, so they've been showing us all these concepts. We love it.
Right.
We eat it up because it's great content, right? And also we're nerds. It's like, of course,
Yeah.
sci-fi, the future. But the reality is it's really hard to actually make a product out of something like that. And then
Yeah.
here we are, right? This rollable is happening. So this one is the kind of trifold where the screen kind of grows from a regular size to an 18.1 by folding back. It kind of folds outward, and then you can turn it into a tablet by closing the lid, or you can do a tent mode where two different people can watch two different things. You could be working on the keyboard, and somebody on the other side could be watching TV. Like it's really cool, and I actually feel like it's less. I feel like it's less challenging to make that the other way around. Like I think that the rollable, while they're making it and it's real, it is gonna be really expensive, of course, but also heavy and lots of moving parts. This has no motors in it. It's just, you do all the folding, you do all the work, right? And I think I kind of want them to perfect this because I think this would be lighter and thinner and possibly slightly more affordable because those folding displays have been around. That's nothing new, right? What are your thoughts? Do you think, how close do you think? Because remember, the rollable we saw as a concept before, right?
Right. So it's cool. They're all cool, but the problem really comes down to is like longevity of it, right? Would it work for you is this like actually performing to the level that you want on daily basis? The laptop has to be sturdy enough. Can it travel well, right? Like I saw some comments about my particular post. It said like, oh, but the screen's out, it will get dirty so soon. Even though it has a cover, like that was an immediate thought of audience. So it's like there is already it's cool, but there's also a worry. How would they perfect this is always a worry, I feel like. And you're right. I think the foldable one's much more like it makes more sense to me as a functional level because laptop is not something you just put away and you don't use. You use it daily basis very often, right?
Yeah.
So I totally agree with you. Rollable is pretty cool. I also personally would prefer to get like a foldable laptop rather than a rollable. I'm always thinking, well, like it's cool, but like if I need to go hurry, how long would it take for me to close this down, make sure it's safe? It's in my backpack, whatever. Whereas like foldable, I should go boop and they go.
Yeah. I think the challenge too is that outward folding displays have always been plagued with issues. Even Huawei, who's kind of were the first to do that.
Right.
Their first folding book style was an outer folding, and it's always been fraught with problems because that edge when it's open it's generally safe, but when it's closed, you get that edge like that's going to be bumped into, and like it's super fragile, right? So like
Right.
you need some sort of cover, which as you mentioned, this has.
Mm-hmm.
But then, you know, at the same time, it's like you can't just throw it in your bag, right?
Exactly.
And I kind of think in that sense, the rollables, you know, sure, it takes time to roll it down, to pack it away. But once it's packed away, it's probably pretty safe. So I can understand why they did the rollable first. But at the same time, I'm just like, damn it. Like, I kind of think this is a better concept. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I think Lenovo is just freaking nailing it every time they show us a concept. It's just like happy joy for me, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like every time I see Lenovo product, I'm just fascinated because I
Yeah.
feel like, what are they coming out with next? I was like, there's no possible way that they could have another launch. They could have another concept, but they always beat me to it. Like, it's incredible.
That's cool. So what are your thoughts on the Xiaomi car? Just before I let you go on about it, I just want to point out to those of you on the audience who don't listen or don't pay attention to the car stuff I do, just to give you some context, if you're paying attention today, the SU7 or SU7 is actually how it's called in China, is their sedan that Xiaomi launched about a year ago. And you know, they started teasing in like November 23 and then launched it around this time in 24. And it's a phenomenal, you know, sedan. It's very competitive. You know, the closest equivalent in North America would be like a Tesla Model 3 or a Model S. And, you know, Tesla is full of, you know, bad juju right now. And I totally get those of you who are immediately going to dismiss it. But here's the reality from an engineering and technology point of view. There's nothing like Tesla and Rivian and Lucid, those three, in North America from the traditional car maker that can match what China's doing, right? Tesla, Lucid, and Rivian, for better or for worse, for Tesla part, are the best at EVs and the technology in EVs. And you know, Xiaomi comes along, smartphone manufacturer, has a big ecosystem of products. Like you can see, for those of you on video, you might be able to see here, there is a Xiaomi, you know, air purifier right there in my room. So they're everywhere. They do all kinds of products. And, you know, the reality is they came out of nowhere. They kind of did what Apple wasn't able to do. They made a car in 3 years. And it's not just a car, because a lot of Chinese companies make cars and some of them are, you know, just fine. I mean, every EV in China is pretty good because they're really good at like vertical integration, ecosystem, hardware and software talking together. You know, they don't have the limitations that the traditional car makers have about suppliers, getting the parts and all that. And in the same way as, you know, Rivian, Lucid, and Tesla started from scratch. And so they have that advantage of starting from scratch. But Xiaomi did it in, you know, what normally would take 5 or 6 years, you know, did it in 3. And not only did they do it in 3, the result is spectacular. So there's the SU7, the SU7 has a history of being a pretty awesome EV to start with. And so what they did is they came out with like kind of like the, you know, crazy version, right? The Ultra. And it's kind of like if, you know, Model S Plaid or Model 3 Performance or the Lucid Air Sapphire, which is like a $250,000 decked out to the max, you know, like 1,234 horsepower, you know, version of their sedan. Like this is kind of the concept they were going for. And so they had the Ultra at the display. And, you know, 0 to 60 in less than 2 seconds. Like we're talking hypercar territory here. And of course, this car is going to be coming out in China soon. And, you know, Xiaomi's been playing with the idea of going to the West, at least Europe and some other parts outside of China, of Asia and the Middle East. Yeah. Definitely in the Middle East. I can see them do that.
Oh yeah.
So what you know, with that context behind me, so that people understand how special this car is, simply because they've made it in such a short time and it's hyper competitive and hypercar performance on this Ultra version. What do you think? Like, do you think, obviously it's not going to come here to the US because of the tariffs and our fascist regime that we're dealing with right now? That just doesn't get it when it comes to EVs and technology and doing it right. But I think like the fact that we see this car at MWC really tells me a lot. And it tells me that this is just like another smartphone. Like it's a, you know, I joked around early in the days of Tesla saying it felt like a tablet on wheels. You know, I think the SU7 is kind of the ultimate version of that. And that's why it was at MWC, right?
Yeah. So to be fair, EV is still a new like genre for me, but I just got into it probably like mid last year or so,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm still rolling up, and I'm like, I can't catch up. Like I'm trying to learn more.
Oh,
but
it's
like,
insane.
It's
Yeah.
so fast. Like the car world is so fast, and then. At first, when you see the SU7 or SU7 on show floor, you're just like, okay, it's a nice car. But then when you hear specs, you're like, that's impossible. It sounds like something you see in a like my little nerd side here, like anime,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
something that would just
Yeah,
pop
yeah.
out, like a little too movie-esque. It's not realistic in your head, right? Like, how can something go from 0 to 100 in that short amount of like time?
Yeah.
That is fascinating. And then
Yeah.
then like my brain always does this, right? Safety precaution. Like, is it safe to do that, right?
Probably not. I mean, the reality is,
Yeah.
this is my take as somebody who's been driving electric for a decade and has owned a bunch of Teslas, and I don't right now because, as I said, it's sticky and problematic. But I think as somebody who's very familiar, has driven every EV, reviews the cars and stuff, anything faster than 0 to 60, to be clear, 0 to 60 miles per hour is roughly the same as 0 to 100 kilometers, which is what you said. When you said 100, it wasn't
Right.
100 miles, it was 100 kilometers. They're about the same speeds. Technically, 100 kilometers is 62 miles an hour. So
Okay.
0 to 60 times anything over 3.5, you will start losing your lunch. Like, I am not joking. It will
Yeah.
physically hurt you. So
Yeah.
it's already stupid, right? So like, I think it's just impressive on paper, or if you take the
Right.
car to the racetrack or something like that.
But who does that on a daily basis?
Right. But on a
Right?
daily basis, honestly, you don't need a regular Model 3 does 0 to 60 in 4 point something, 4.1, 4.2. You're at the edge already of what is comfortable. The performance model does it in like 3 point something, maybe less than 3, and it's pretty painful. So 3.5 is kind of where I recommend people settle down.
Gotcha.
And honestly, yes, it's not safe. If you press that pedal really hard on that car, it will literally launch forward, like lurch forward. Like you will reach the end of the block before you can blink an eye, and that is not safe.
That sounds scary.
So remember, those of you who are car enthusiasts out there, if you want to have fun with your car, take it to the track, okay? And then, the other problem with EV is weight. And then you have to stop all that really quickly if you want to stop it. And that's hard. And even though this car is on the lighter side for an EV, it's still, going to be something to think about. So is it safe? No. Is it fun? Yes. Is it technically impressive? Yes. And just because it's not safe doesn't mean we should dismiss it. I just want,
Right, of course.
I think that there are like plenty of EVs that are faster than 3.5 right now. Model S Plaid from Tesla, even the Cybertruck, Model 3 performance. There is Model Y performance, I think, is around 3.5. Like, I mean, you're talking like Lucid, Rivian. Rivian does some of, I think the quad motor does like less than 3 seconds as well to a 60. Like, ouch. I'm telling you, it hurts. And you will get queasy really fast. So, do you want that?
I mean,
I don't
honestly,
know.
I think it's more about them, like Xiaomi, showing off that we could do this, right?
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
more capability. It's not really they think that someone's going to do it, right?
Yeah. No, it's impressive because it shows what they've been able to do with just another year, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's very cool.
I think it's just the whole world. I mean, we see this as trend in tech, right? It's slimmer, faster, and better. Like, it's all about those 3 elements, right? So it has to be one of the 3.
Yeah,
and
for
I
sure.
think faster is always with the car, even though no one's going to drive that fast. Or
hopefully not.
I hope not. I mean, let's not say that, because there's going to be some crazies that will try to do stupid stuff, but out of our control.
Absolutely. But you made a good point, and I think this is a good segue into the news we have to cover. Slim phones. So, Apple has launched a whole bunch of products this past week, and I think some of them, I could have probably covered on last week's podcast. Some of the stuff had already, I think the MacBook Air M4 had already been announced by the time we did last week's podcast. I just decided to reserve it for this week because like we really wanted to focus on MWC, right? And
Right.
Apple had nothing to do with that. So just rapid firing through some news, and then we can dive into what you think is most important and interesting to you, because I'd love to hear your voice on this. Because people know how I feel. MacBook Air M4. We have a brand new MacBook Air. The big news here is that there's a new color. It's this kind of blue, very light blue color, which is cool. But that means the space gray is gone. M4 chip, of course, better performance, better battery life, slightly bigger battery actually on paper if you look at the specs. Cheaper, $999 base model with 16 gigs of RAM, but only 256 gigs of storage. And the most important thing I think for me, which I feel like a lot of people are not talking about, is a 12 megapixel camera that does center stage. So like right now I'm on my Mac Mini M4 and I'm using my iPhone 16 Pro with continuity camera as a camera. And for those of you watching on Patreon, it looks really good. That's a 48 megapixel sensor, but it used to be 12 on the iPhone. And imagine that kind of sensor in your MacBook Air's lid, basically. And now you don't have to do the continuity with your phone anymore. Because until now, it was like something like a 2 megapixel or something. And it wasn't that great, right? So I think it's a big bump. And then we've got a new Mac Studio. There's an M3 Ultra and an M4 Max. The M3 Ultra is actually faster than the M4 Max, and they're super expensive, or at least the M3 Ultra is. And these are not for you and me. I think these are for professionals who need to do like a lot of local AI stuff, or developers, or, if you're like in a recording studio and you're doing a million audio tracks with effects, or you're editing, raw 8K red camera footage, multi-streams of it or something. The bottom line is it's really impressive that Apple's able to push M series chips to this level of performance, and of course to give us up to 512 gigabytes of RAM, which is like I can't even wrap my head around it. And then we got a couple of iPads. We got a new iPad Air with an M3 chip, and we got an iPad regular updated to the A16 chip. So what's your thought on this lineup of new devices from Apple? I mean, we got a new iPhone like 2 weeks ago, and now here we are with a whole bunch of new products. Which one tickles your fancy? Which one excites you? Tell me everything you're thinking about.
Honestly, it's always laptop first for me.
Yeah,
because we have to be practical in our audiences too. I think most people are interested in laptop. Color is great, but so what, right? But it's always about the performance. And then for me, it's just like I'm fascinated how quickly they're turning over, accelerating the performance level. Because you think that, oh, this is good. Like even from my Pro to my Air upgrade, I was like, there's no way, because I paid so much for Pro. And then I was like, well, I need something lighter to travel with. So I did, and I switched to Air, and I was like, this is just M2. And then I was like, oh my gosh, this is fascinating.
What Pro did you come from?
MacBook Pro.
Yeah, but what? Was it Intel? Was it M1? What was it?
Yeah, it was M1.
Wow, okay. So you didn't notice, right? That tells you, see, I have a belief, and I keep telling people this, and they get mad at me. A lot of the nerds that you and I know, every time I say this, they're like, Miriam, stop it. And I'm like, nobody needs more than a MacBook Air. If there's one computer that everybody can 100% get all their work done on, and I'm talking everybody being 99% of the world, it's the MacBook Air.
Yeah, sure.
And again, I understand some of you are Windows people. I've got a ZenBook A14 back there behind me that I just received. I'm super excited about. Snapdragon-based, super lightweight Asus laptop. It's going to be amazing. Ceraluminum. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a Mac zealot. Everybody knows that I'm not an iPhone user, but I'm a Mac user. But this is the fact. Very few people will max out a MacBook Air. Like if you are, then congratulations, it's time for you to buy a Pro. But I believe there are people who buy Pros. Like my roommate has a MacBook Pro 14. They don't need it. Absolutely not. They're a student. In arts, all they do is type essays on that thing. It's complete overkill. I lose my mind every time I see them sitting in front of this computer, think to myself, you spend way too much money. Now, don't get me wrong, 120
And it's
hertz
heavy.
display. Yeah, the weight. But 120 hertz display, I want to see that on the MacBook Air. But I agree 100% with you.
I feel like, so back, my first MacBook was in college. So
Yeah.
back then it would crash everything, right? Because we were still in an early era. We're talking like more than a decade ago, right?
Right.
So back then, yes, like Pro made a huge difference. Now with the Airs, they're incredible.
I know.
Like, I can't believe I'm actually using Air on a day-to-day basis. It used to crash for me all the time. So like, I edit a lot too, and we travel a lot, right?
Yeah.
And hasn't crashed once.
I use an M2 Air for travel like you. Yeah.
Yeah, and it hasn't crashed once, which is like crazy because I edit content for a living.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it says a lot and how far it has come, right? And then you're telling me, right, like M4, of course, it's so exciting to know they're saving something better performance with smaller budget. Like that's insane. And I feel like correct me if I'm wrong or if you disagree, but like I feel like Apple's starting to feel that pressure because I know Apple is Apple and Apple's always going to be Apple. People love Apple, but everyone outside, right? The PCs are getting super competitive, cheaper, faster, thinner, so crazy that I feel like Apple's starting to feel that pressure of, well, we need to release it a little faster now. I'm feeling it.
I think it's interesting because I think you're right. They do maybe feel the pressure, although I don't think anything right now that's ARM-based on PC can touch any MacBook.
Agree.
The M is still way ahead of Snapdragon. And I, don't get me wrong. As I said, I love the ZenBook A14 I have. I have also the other ZenBook, the higher end one. And I have, a bunch of Lenovo laptops with Snapdragon, X Elite. And I love them, but they're still not as good as my MacBook Air. There's absolutely no doubt about it. It's not that they crash or they're too slow. It's just this little things like on the Lenovo, the camera is not as good. On the Asus, it's like, this one is a Snapdragon X Plus, so it's going to be the slower version of the chip, right? And so it's not going to compare as well to an M2, never mind an M4 Air. But you're right. So to me, what is exciting about this MacBook is that in 2 years, like my MacBook Air M2 is 2 years old. In 2 years, when my MacBook Air either breaks or starts to be a little too slow, not slow enough to use, but slow enough that I feel like I need a boost, then I'll be able to buy the M4 Air on sale. And it'll last me another 4 years. See what I'm saying? Because right now, get this, folks, if you're shopping for a MacBook Air and you don't want to spend $999 on an M4, you can get an M2 Air for $699, brand new. Okay? That is a steal because we both have an M2 Air. We know exactly what that thing can do. So just consider that. I actually just picked one up for Theo, my spouse and producer, because their MacBook Air M1, after 5 years, has finally bit the bucket. The screen is starting to break. Some lines and stuff. Here's the thing, right? To me, that's the most exciting too. What about the iPads and the Studio? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm a little shy on the information. I just started to see my friends because a lot of my friends are involved with Apple content. So I'm starting to slowly see. I saw, I don't know if you know Frank McShan.
Yes,
like he's a big Apple guy. And
he's been on the podcast.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that. So he's like a friend of mine and he was showing off with the pen. And I just thought the interaction of it all was cool. But for me, iPad is not a big
I'm not an
era
iPad
for me.
person. I get it though. I think some people love their iPads and use them as
I
their
just
main.
doodle.
Like Harry McCracken, who writes for Fast Company, who's like a legend in journalism and tech. He uses an iPad for everything, and I'm always amazed because I'm like, there's no way for me. I need, I'm a nerd. I came from making video games. I need a command line. I need to be able to twiddle around with Unix. I need to be able to have a file system and organize my stuff. And I'm much more comfortable. Does that mean I'm against touchscreen on my Mac? No, I'd love to have a touchscreen on my Mac, but I'm just saying, like, given the choice between an iPad Pro and or an iPad Air even, like that new one, M3, and a MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro, I would take the MacBook every time, every day.
Same.
In fact, I would take the ZenBook, Asus Windows machine before I would take an iPad. Personally, I need a computer. I need a pickup truck. I don't need like a fancy luxury sedan, which is what I think the iPad is, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with dogs. I would prefer a small, tiny teacup dogs kind of feel. But I feel like when it comes to my engine, anything electronic, I want big, fast, big things. I don't know.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
just feel like more complete
Yeah.
with laptop, and I feel like I'm secure in a way than an iPad or a tablet.
Yeah, it's also a question of familiarity, I think. Like, I'm not
Right.
knocking people who have only used iPads, never really got into computers, or, the people who basically just need a Chromebook, they need a web browser. That's all they do.
Yeah.
Like, Chromebooks are good for that. And especially the high-end ones, which are really nice, have like a metal build and a really nice display and trackpad and everything. Those things, they make sense to me. For people, if you're just, all you do is web pages all day, like, why even buy a Mac at that point? You don't need it.
Sure,
like, you and I want it, need it, but even Windows machines are overkill for most people. So, I think it's interesting, but I know people who love their iPads and use that and do crazy stuff with them. And to them, I say, awesome. I'm glad you can now buy an iPad Air M3 and an iPad A16 base model. But here's the thing, again, in the same way as I feel like 99.9% people just need a base MacBook Air, 99.9% people just need a base iPad, like the 10-inch A16 that just came out with. That's all you need, folks. You do not need to go higher than that. Trust me on this.
And then like kind of coming back to it, right? So iPad, I think for me is the app capability too.
Yeah.
It's not a laptop. So it might have limited capability with apps, thinking that it's much more for mobile apps rather than a tablet app, right? So I had a few problems with that the most, which is my main pain point. And then it comes to something like a pro level of iPad. It's like prices are so expensive on those. Is that worth it over a laptop? Is the question, right?
The iPad Pros, honestly, I don't get it because considering I can buy a MacBook, even just a MacBook Air, that's so much better for that kind of money. I'm like, no. Like the iPad Air, I kind of get. Okay. There is some value prop there for me. Like if I just wanted a nice tablet to kind of put around town, with, or around my, my living room kind of thing. But the rest of it, nah.
Yeah, I have iPad Air and I just use it for scheduling.
Yeah, or like watching Netflix in the bathtub is my thing.
Exactly.
All right, so let's talk about some leaks and rumors here. Apple stuff real quick. iPhone Air dimensions have leaked. So now we know for sure, it's a leak, but 5.5 millimeters. That's the same thing as a very thin, speaking of iPads, iPad Pro. So what do you think of that? Is that hot to you?
Yeah. I mean, we were just talking about how everything's going thin, faster, of that sort, and I think the trend now with phone is being thin, right? It's not about being smaller always.
Yeah, but I mean, I think here, let's be realistic. The way I look at it is, the phone manufacturers have run out of steam as to what to make that's cool and new, because folding phones are really expensive and they're not really that popular yet, especially in the West. But that's a whole new category they try to introduce. And I think, it has its merits. I love it. I've got, my Oppo Find N5 here that I just freaking absolutely love. For those of you who are, that's in the case right now, for those of you who've seen it before. Anyway, the point is, I'm not against foldables, but I think that because they're running out of steam on the bar style phones, the regular phones, they're like, ooh, what can we do? Ooh, thin. But here's the thing I want to point out. 5.5 is very impressive, but it's not that impressive in the context of Motorola is the Moto Z, the one with the mods. Remember the magnetic things in the back? The original Verizon version of that was 5 millimeters, not 5.5. Oppo has made a 4.8 millimeter phone about 10 years ago. And Vivo made a 5.1 millimeter phone about the same time, like about 10 years ago or so. Like I think like maybe between 2012 and 2015, there was a big race in China to make the thinnest phone, and they did. And then it just didn't take off. Like nobody cares because the compromises at the time were pretty bad.
Yeah.
But I think what's exciting to me is this is the size of an Apple iPhone 16 Pro Max. So it's going to be big phone, but super slim phone. So I think that's very cool. So I'm looking forward to this one, to be honest with you. This is exciting to me. I am all in on the thin phones because I want something more interesting to deal with. We also have a foldable iPhone rumor that's, it's been coming and going. It's a rumor, so take it with a grain of salt. But my take on this is...
far-fetched, no?
No,
Like the foldable.
no, it needs to
You don't
happen.
think
Apple
so?
is so ready for a folding phone. Yeah, but I don't think they want a book style. I think that if this is a book style, it's like a major mistake. Because here's the thing. The flip type phones, like Moto Razr style, come on. Everyone that's an iPhone user, Theo, my spouse and producer, they're an iPhone user, and they also have a Moto Razr because they love it. They don't like
Yeah.
Android. So imagine iOS on a flip form factor. I think that's what Apple needs to do. Now, this is a rumor of a book style, so I'm not sure what to make of it.
Seen it, done it.
Would you buy an iPhone if it was a folding iPhone?
I would, like you said, if it was a flip, yes, not fold. Because
Right.
I think fold is like you have to be so impressive. It doesn't matter if you're an Apple, you have to be so impressive with fold. But flip, like, you know how you're just talking about super thin diameter? If they could do that, same battery life, and make it that thin and flip, even if it goes for a very premium cost, I think people will buy it. Because that's impressive.
I mean, look, to be honest with you, the only thing Apple has to solve is the crease. And apparently this rumor is that they have found a solution to make a creaseless folding phone because they're perfectionists and they don't want to crease.
Right.
And we know from Samsung, like 7 years or whatever, 6 years of Samsung making folding phones now, that their folding phones are very rugged, very good at surviving the everyday beat up of life. So the only challenge is if you drop something on the display with it open, you will probably break it. And that's, you drop something on your display on a regular phone, you might crack the glass, but the phone will still work. And I think maybe Apple has another solution for that as well. But I think that ruggedness is really, I think ruggedness is really a non-issue, I think, anymore. I think that 7 years in, 6 years in, whatever it's been now, I think we're at the place where folding phones have matured. I mean, this fine N5 I have shows you like 4-point-something millimeter thick, like everything, all the specs, everything, right? Like, I think that Apple is ready to go. Like, we have paved the way on Android land for Apple to make a really good folding phone. And I'm not saying that to be like a jerk. I think this is good. I want to see an iPhone that folds because so many people want an iPhone that folds. And I hate to say this for us Android people, it's going to kill the folding phone market if Apple makes one because that's what, like a flip in particular, that's all people want. Everyone wants a flipping, folding iPhone. And like, I don't know how well Razr and Z Flip are going to do if they do that, to be frank. You know?
Yeah, I think they will be very threatened. Like, you know how you're just talking about Razr being such a big popular because they're flip? Yeah, I definitely see that being threatened.
All right, we got a bunch of Samsung news here. I'm going to rapid fire through some of it. I want to speak more about the leaks and rumors. Again, while we were at Mobile World Congress, actually early on in the week, surprise, surprise, Apple decided to grace us with a bunch of A-series phones. So Galaxy A56, A36, and A26. I don't really have much to say here. I don't know. Like, I'm not a big fan of the A-series. I'm not saying it's bad. It's a pretty solid product overall. What's your gut feeling on this? What's your take? There's a pink one, so that's good. I'm happy about that.
So A-series are budget phones, right? And
I mean, mid-range, really.
Mid-range,
You know?
let's say mid-range. So this is the range that my husband covers most of it. So I've seen it, over his shoulders of what he looks over and all that. So I know a little bit. And what I've noticed is, like, first of all, last year, A55 was not in US. So 56 is exciting for us, right? Because we could actually have it in US. And then secondly, just seeing that A-series are getting better battery life, first of all, it's quite exciting because, come on, let's give some love to the mid-range people, okay? Like,
agreed.
Everyone deserves a good battery life. And I think that's my exciting point for A-series more than anything else. And the screen being bigger is great too. Just being honest, my mom and mother-in-law, they both love A-series.
Yeah, no, I think it's solid.
They're simple people.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Seeing that they could be more happier with what they already love is great. And yeah, their main problem is the battery life. So I think it's solving a pretty good problem for us.
Yeah. So just so you guys know real quick, Exynos 1580, I'm just going to focus on the A56 here. So that's the latest Exynos chipset. We've got a nice, big screen, 6.7 inch, I believe, which is, pretty normal for the 50 series. We've got a 50 megapixel main camera, 12 megapixel ultra wide, and a 5 megapixel macro. 12 megapixel selfie lens. It's pretty much what you'd expect from an A series. They don't generally put a telephoto on the A, but it's getting a bunch of AI features, circle to search and all that. And it's $500, right? For 128 gigs. So it's like in that same, at least for North America, let's preface this because in Asia, you can get some crazy stuff for that kind of money, but it's in that same category of price as, the iPhone 16e, which I think is $100 too expensive. I've said that many times. It'll come down. The same price bracket as the Nothing phones, both of them, the 3A and 3A Pro. Same price bracket as the Pixel 8A right now, but 9A probably soon. I don't expect the 9A to go up in price much if it does. And so I think the A series is a solid no-brainer kind of value. If you're a Samsung user and you don't want to spend money on a flagship and you walk, especially if you walk into like a Best Buy or a Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile store, boom, off you go, right? So I think, the question for me is like, I need to check out the specs, but does it have wireless charging? I don't think so. 45
I don't
wired.
think so.
45, but it looks like it's got a metal frame, which is really nice. And, it's got that nice glass front, like iPhone slab sides design. The camera bump looks very Galaxy S series, which I think is going to make a lot of people feel like they have a fancy phone. 1900 nits of peak brightness means it's going to be bright. Victus Plus to protect it. 12 gigs of RAM. Unfortunately, that's not happened. It's only 8, but, whatever. I'm cool with that. And it's, it's not super thick either. It's 7.4 millimeters. So I think people are going to love this. And, probably, I don't see the specs here, but I think the display is going to be 120 hertz because it's been like that in the past. You're going to get, a nice 1080p panel here. So yeah, overall, I'm happy with this.
I also think that people just love colors, even though we all put cases on. Something about, I don't know, maybe they got the pulse on it, but I noticed that everything for like Ultra series, they don't care about putting super pink color. But when it comes to A series, they love putting pretty colors and you want to buy it.
Yeah.
So that's exciting because they actually have colors that we want who use Ultras.
Exactly. All right, let's wrap up with a couple of items.
Yeah.
Samsung Galaxy S25 Edge battery numbers have come out. And, here's the thing I want to quickly say before we dive into this one. Samsung is still traumatized by the whole Galaxy Note 7 thing. Like as an entity, as a corporation, as a group of people running the show, they're very hesitant. For example, silicon carbon batteries are very popular on Chinese flagships now, even mid-rangers. That's why you see 6,000 milliamp hours on the OnePlus 13 and that kind of stuff. Those batteries have been around forever. They've been used in cars. They're safe. Everything's cool. But oh no, Samsung's freaking out. And they're not doing that. And so we know they're not going to do that for the Edge, the S25 Edge, which is that super slim phone. So the question is, how is it going to hold up battery life-wise if they don't put one of those super crazy, high-capacity silicon carbon batteries in there? And now we have our answer, because the answer is they are putting basically a meager little 3,900 milliamp hour battery in this phone. And I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see if they pair it with the Snapdragon 8 Elite 7 core, the one for slim phones that's in the Oppo Find N5, then it's going to be a little less power hungry. So it might actually be about the same battery life as an S25, even though it's a bigger phone. So I don't know. I think they could have done better here, but I think, again, they're traumatized and they're not going to do it because they have bad memories from their time before.
And I think it's disappointing. If you make something thinner,
100%.
you expect that to be better, not less. And if you're going to make it thinner and you shorten the battery, what's the point?
Yeah.
It's not cooler.
It's not cooler. But the thickness is supposed to be 5.84, which is cool. Again, it's good, but it's not like Apple, iPhone Air thin, and it's not what we had 10 years ago thin. So again, I think if they put a silicon carbon battery in there, it would have been a really good idea. But you know what? Go see your therapist, Samsung. talk about your battery fears and your traumas. I think we will all be better off for that. I think Apple also has to go silicon carbon. I don't know if they will on this iPhone Air, but they need to. The other rumor we have is, speaking of flip phones, and we love our flip phones, don't we? I certainly do. That the cover screen on the Z Flip 7 from Samsung is finally going to be competitive with the Razr. So that actually got me pretty excited because, look, I love the underdog, and Motorola. I just love the design of their phones overall. Like, not just because they have the bigger cover display, but overall, I just think that they have a much more cohesive design, and the colors and the choices and the materials. And, rumors are they're going to bump all these materials and colors to even, crazier things. I don't know if that's true, but I mean, I'm hoping, because somebody's got to do colors, because Apple and Samsung and Google, boring. So if this rumor is true, that there's a cover display that's competitive, that means that you might actually, want to look at the Z Flip this year instead of a Razr. And, I do still feel that Samsung has more, potentially more ruggedness in their phones because they've been doing this longer. But that's just maybe just a preconceived idea. I'm not sure. I've never had any issues with Moto, and Theo had a Z Flip before, a 3, and then they switched to the Razr, and they have had 0 issues. But yeah, what do you think? Are you excited about this bigger cover screen?
I'm actually really excited about the Z Flip. I think this is the first year I'm actually excited about it. I'm like, okay, I want to know everything about it. And the fact that it's being compared to Motorola, it's quite exciting. Because I feel you're right. I feel that's one thing they've been acing in their game. And if Samsung could catch up with the software and the hardware, can Motorola keep up is the question, right?
I don't know if they'll catch up on the software. I think they're kind of lost on the software. I think this is where Moto has the edge. Pardon the pun, because there is a Moto edge. Oh boy, I'm such a nerd. But yeah, I think you're right. I think you made a very good point. I think that this might just be the first flip that I'm like, okay, this is no longer BS. No offense to those of you that have a flip. I think it's a solid phone, but I think the Razr is just far superior right now, today.
That's fair.
And I think that the Z Flip needs to catch up. And seeing these rumors makes me hopeful that, we'll get something, that Samsung's waking up a little bit.
Yeah, great.
Cool. Well, listen, we should wrap up. Do you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet, where your social media handles are, your channels, YouTube, TikTok, all that good stuff? Go for it.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, all with the same channel named Jenny B Doll, Jenny BDOLL. And I'm happy to chat. I'm happy to show you all the tips and tricks and review a lot of fun upcoming tech.
There you go. Folks, please subscribe to all of Jenny's content and chat with her on social and chat with me about this podcast, to both of us together. You know where to find me on the internet. I'm at Tankgirl. That's TNKGRL, just like the comic book character, drop the vowels. That's me on social media everywhere. I'm primarily on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads, but I'm everywhere. And, the podcast itself lives at mobiletechpodcast.com, but you'll find it on every one of your podcast apps, from Google to Apple to Pocket Casts or whatever. So subscribe to the show. Tell your friends. If you're here for the first time, please consider subscribing. And there is, of course, a YouTube channel, youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast. It's got some additional content. I just did an unboxing video of the Nothing Phone 3A regular and pro, so check that out. I also have a bunch of shorts on there. So yeah, youtube.com, you know how it works. Just subscribe, tell your friends, click the bell, comment. And if you want to support me, patreon.com/Tankgirl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. If you want, there's a tier that's $5 a month and gets you a video version of this podcast a day in advance every week. So you get to see the podcast and hear it before everyone else. And you get to see our pretty faces and brandishing beautiful little Barbie phones like this one and other things. And yeah, so if you want to support me, that's a great way to do it. Patreon.com/TNKGRL. And I want to thank our sponsor, Mint Mobile. You know I review a lot of phones, so I'm constantly juggling multiple devices. While that's fun, it also means I'm spending a lot of money for wireless service on multiple SIMs. Thankfully, there's Mint Mobile, and that's who I'm teaming up with for today's podcast. If you want to save money on your wireless service, switch to Mint Mobile. You've probably seen the Mint Mobile ads featuring Ryan Reynolds, but let me quickly tell you how fantastic their service is, especially for tech-savvy early adopters like us. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data. They're built on the nation's largest 5G network. They keep costs low because they sell direct to you online. They cut out the retail stores and salespeople. Why should you pay more than you have to for access to the same network? In my experience testing phones, Mint Mobile delivers the same data speeds and call quality as the big three for a fraction of the cost. Switching to Mint is super easy. Thanks to their eSIMs, you can sign up and activate immediately right on your phone from the comfort of your home. No more standing around waiting in line at a big wireless store. You can keep your current devices and phone number and easily switch services. And if your phone isn't eSIM compatible, Mint will ship you a new SIM card free of charge. The whole process only takes 15 minutes, and if you get stuck, Mint has a great customer service team to get you through it. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, plus lightning-fast 5G and free mobile hotspot. Mint will show you how much data you use each month and recommend plans that save you money. Mint also offers a modern family plan that lets you set up a super affordable family plan with as little as 2 lines. Use my link, mintmobile.com/mobiletech, to get premium wireless starting at $15 a month. Stop paying more than you need on your wireless bill and start saving big with Mint Mobile.
And Jenny, thanks so much for joining me and having a party with me about phones and MWC and Macs and all that good stuff. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. This was so fun. Invite me again next time.
Absolutely. We'll have you on again in the future. And folks, stay tuned because we'll have another show next week. But until then, cheers, everybody.
Bye.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.